one of the reasons why I try to be a little bit slow in terms of demanding action is because until we know the facts of what exactly took place in this shooting, it's hard to figure out what should have been in place to stop this shooting from happening. In other words, when the details are not out there, oftentimes whatever you say ends up not looking accurate when some of the facts come out. So if you're just listening to us on Clay and Buck, we went live and carried the press conference, which just happened with the Texas Police Force's spokesperson, who was explaining this incident 2 days ago in Uvalde, Texas. So the details, as reported by this spokesperson, are that this killer, this shooter, walked into an unlocked school door, opened an unlocked school door, that there was no armed security that confronted him at all, that he opened an unlocked school door carrying his weapon, walked into the school, and then walked into an open classroom where he almost immediately opened fire. This is what was just told to us about 25 minutes ago. So these kids were completely unprotected in the school, according to this report. There was no armed security that confronted this shooter. There wasn't even a locked door at the school. He simply walked up, opened the door, walked in. The kids were not then in a locked classroom. The door to the classroom was open. He walked in and he opened fire almost immediately on the kids in the classroom. Police and security forces responded, according to this report, within 4 minutes of him entering the school. There were exchanged gunfire. And then, according to this report, they did not get into the classroom for an hour. Now, that doesn't make sense to me that there would be that much of a process between when they got there and when they went in. You can go listen to the Clay and Buck show. We took calls from people who are involved in SWAT forces, and they say that's a counter to all protocol. That as soon as you hear shooting, you go all in. If they were returning and exchanging fire with this guy within 4 minutes of his entry into the school, to me, that's where you question the police response. But again, there was not even a locked door. The classroom door was not locked, and there was no school security official there. Questions that are still out there that I don't believe we know the answer to. Why was this school not locked down? If this guy crashed his car and police had been called at 11:30 to be told that there was a crash car and an armed man, why was the entire school not locked down? Did the school receive that notice? Why was that classroom door not shut? Evidently, that classroom door was incredibly powerful and very difficult even for police to get inside. In fact, it sounds like the shooter used that security to lock himself in and barricade himself effectively inside of that classroom until that door was breached and he was shot and killed by these Border Patrol officials. Okay, so why did it take an hour? Why was there an hour between when they initially exchanged gunfire and when they were able to actually get into that classroom? Those are big questions. But the biggest question to me is, why weren't the school doors locked? Why wasn't the school on a lockdown? Why weren't the individual classroom doors locked? And why was there no armed security at this school? Effectively, these kids were completely unprotected inside of this elementary school. This matters to me because if you go back and listen to my show yesterday, I said, look, my kids go to public elementary school. We have an armed police officer who is at the school every single day. You cannot enter any other door other than the primary front door of the school during school hours. I have to hold up an ID in order to be buzzed in through otherwise locked doors once I show my ID. I then have to get buzzed in again into an office. So theoretically, there's double locked doors to prevent someone from being able to just walk right into the school. The side doors of the school, to my knowledge, are all supposed to be locked. So just think about this. While everybody is screaming and wanting to cast blame and everything else, this could be a situation as simple as if the school doors have been locked, this guy can't just walk in, okay? If the classroom doors had been locked, this guy can't just walk in and try to shoot these kids, okay? If there was a school resource officer there, in theory, that school resource officer could have confronted him. If the school had been notified that there was a lockdown in effect, every classroom door should have been locked. If they weren't notified, that's another failure. Again, the primary person to blame in any shooting is the shooter himself, the murderer, okay? He is to blame. Oftentimes, we immediately rush right past the person who is the most to blame. But I think it's a fair question to ask as a parent of an elementary school student anywhere. Why wasn't the school door locked? Why weren't the classroom doors locked? Why wasn't there an armed security official there? Why was there not a lockdown notice given? Why did it take all those things? Why did it then take an hour for this shooter to be killed by responding officers when they were inside the school exchanging gunfire with him within 4 minutes of his entry to the school? Now, we all know lots of awful things can happen in those 4 minutes. And there are reports that almost immediately he was shooting children upon entering the school and in that classroom. But there still are a lot of questions that need to be answered, but we're starting to get several answers. And a lot of the initial reports, if this report is true, are proving to have been inaccurate. Okay? So the media might well have gotten a lot of these initial reports wrong, which characterizes and confuses an overall difficult situation to get all the information out for. Okay? Again, my position on this has been I want armed police officers in every single school in America. If we can send $40 billion to Ukraine to help people there, it seems like we can pay whatever is necessary for our kids to be protected in the United States. I think every school door outside of the main entry and including the main entry of schools should be locked all day long inside of schools. Now, some of you are immediately going to think, I've got kids. I think about this too. That doesn't protect kids when they're outside at recess. That doesn't necessarily protect kids when they are coming to or leaving from the school, right? Someone could stand outside and engage in violence there as well, okay? But inside of the school building itself, we need to do everything that we can to protect those kids, and it doesn't sound like that's what happened in Uvalde, Texas. Again, we don't know all the details. I can only imagine how awful it would be to be one of these parents who showed up at the school and was demanding, why aren't police going in? Why are you just waiting outside? I think all of that is valid. If the police are in any way mistreating the parents who are arriving there and are terrified reasonably for what is occurring inside of the school and what might be happening to their children inside, I understand all that, which is why I think the primary police question that can be asked is, why, if you made contact and exchanged fire with this man within 4 minutes, did it then take a full hour for you to get inside of the classroom? All of these details matter. Why do these details matter? Because in looking at tragedy, we can try to avoid future tragedy by ensuring that we don't make the same mistakes again. It appears that every single one of these kids was effectively unprotected and that we didn't even have a locked door at the school based on the report that we just got. Think about how much different things might have been if there was a locked door. People can say, well, if there's a locked door, he could shoot the gun and break the glass and still maybe get in. Yes, that's true. But when you hear gunshots, in theory, every teacher would think, if they didn't already know, hey, let me try to lock my door. It also is possible, depending on how the door was constructed, that even if you break the glass, it's difficult for a grown man to be able to get through the door. If you have an armed security official there, when those gunshots are fired, then that armed security, to try to break the glass to get in, then that armed security guard clearly has notice of someone attempting to make it their entrance into the school, and hopefully could respond and return fire, potentially putting down that guy before he ever gets in the school in the first place, right? Also, if all of the classroom doors are locked, it sounds like the procedures were in place that would have made it very difficult for anyone to get into the classroom. So we had unlocked doors to the school, we had unlocked classroom doors, and we had no security at the school. All three of those things are flaws that allowed this situation to happen. Again, the only person who is responsible for this activity is the shooter himself, but we want to provide protection as much as we possibly can to all of the kids in that school. As a parent of 2 elementary school kids, as the parent of 3 kids, 8th grade, 5th grade, and 1st grade, I think about these kind of dangers all the time, as I'm sure many of you who are listening to or watching me right now do as well. Why did it take the police an hour to get in? Fair question that needs to be answered. But no locked door to the school, no locked door to the classroom, and no armed security guard, meaning that effectively these kids were completely unprotected inside their school when a guy, a madman with a gun, decided to go in and try to kill them.